sprung. The trees are blossoming, the sun is shining, and the birds are singing. Blossoming is one of the main signs that spring has truly arrived. The buds break out into a colourful display, which also attract the vital insects. The scents fill the air, and the dark damp winter has been left behind. Join us in this programme as we explore the new life spring brings to the park and the people who come to visit. Spring has blossomed over much of Nonsuch, and as the warm weather arrives, the visitors' numbers triple. Spring brings with it new growth and happiness. Fledglings can be spotted in the trees above, as the Great British Summer is nearly underway. With the new warmth, plants burst out into a colourful display, from the iconic daffodil to the buttercup. Cow's parsley lines the woodlands, and even the most delicate of flowers is absolutely beautiful. A spectacle unique to Britain, thriving in our coppice woodlands, and it's estimated over half the Wales population is in the British Isles. It is, of course, the iconic Bluebell. The British bluebell marks an ancient woodland, and although we tried our very hardest to find one, the hunt ended up unsuccessful. It is the Spanish, or hopefully the hybrid variety which rule the Nonsuch woodlands. And unlike the name suggests, the bluebell isn't always blue. Colours of pink and white are common amongst the invader. And unlike the British, with flowers along one side of the stem, the Spanish surrounds the stem, and almost has no scent to delight our senses. Bluebells prefer moist, shady and stable conditions, and that's why woodlands are ideal, and they can be found right across the UK. A bulb typically takes 5 years to gain enough energy to produce its first flower spike, and even then it's a race against time to gain as much as the sun's energy before the canopy closes over. And that's why they're only around for a few weeks in woodlands like this. Unfortunately, these bluebells will soon have left us until next year, when the best time to see them is late April or May. But it's been an amazing and spectacular view in our woodlands, and so for now, it's farewell. I'm joining Nonsuch Voles, a volunteer gardening group within the park. And to find out more about what this gardening group does, I'm joining Danny in the formal gardens. So can anyone help out in the gardens volunteering? Because you are a volunteer group, or is it just gardeners and people who like gardening?
No, anyone can volunteer. Alison and myself are both RHS qualified, so we oversee the gardening work, but anyone who's got an interest in either the park or gardening, you know, and they just want to help out, anyone would be welcome.
And it's so rewarding, isn't it, when you finish something and you see your efforts?
It's very satisfying, and you know, we feel like we're giving something to the community as well as doing the, you know, seeing instant work being done and improvements. You know, you feel like you're giving something back to.
And although the weather's not great today, it is said May is the busiest time in the garden, isn't it? So if you've got any work I can help out with?
Well, we're doing some planting just round the corner, so if you want to join in.
Yeah, let's go.
Morning flowers, they swayed in the early breeze.
So as you can see, there's some planting going on.
Yeah.
So if you want to take a
waking out of the field underneath.
Grab a tray.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Today there's been a large quantity of plants delivered from the council, so I'm getting stuck in to help plant them in the formal garden's flower beds. The Nonsuch Voles, who I'm working with, are an ever-growing volunteer group with a fairly good quantity of volunteers already, who help out every Thursday in the garden. What's great though is that they're even encouraging an interest in the outdoor activities to an early age group. But also, because they work in the woodlands with John, the coppice worker, they make these beautifully natural plant supports with Nonsuch's sustainable wood.
I think we have one more to go for me.
Watch the birds and I stood in the sun. Take your time, it's what they say to me.
As the morning progresses, more and more plants are placed in the flower beds, which as you can see is a great team effort.
I've flown over Ireland, I haven't actually been there. Yeah.
The results are lovely, but I joined up with John, another volunteer, to find out more about one particular plant in the garden.
One of the main features of the formal garden at Nonsuch is the magnificent wisteria which grows here against the eastern wall of the garden. And we're often asked how old the wisteria is, and we certainly know there's been a very large and impressive wisteria flowering here since at least 1860 and probably a lot longer. One of the bits of information that helps us with this is the Handbook of Epsom, which was written by C.J. Sweet in 1860. And if I just read a short passage from it, he says, "Before leaving Nonsuch, the visitor should look into the garden, where a wisteria tree on the garden wall, one side of which alone is 120 feet long. One wonders how the sap will flow such a length along the straight branches. This is, however, a very quickly growing tree in good situations." So we know that this wisteria was here well before 1860 and probably from the early 1800s. And he was right. As we can see here, the wisteria does grow very quickly. And one of the jobs that the Nonsuch Voles carries out in conjunction with Michael, the resident gardener, is to prune the wisteria twice a year. We'll prune it in July once it's finished flowering to cut these long tendrils back, and then we'll prune it again at the end of winter in January to encourage it to flower in abundance. And in fact, spring is a very good time to come to Nonsuch because not only is the wisteria flowering, but we've also got some amazing lilacs, and together they add to the colour and scent in the garden.
The wisteria is lovely, but whilst the voles and gardeners were here, we decided to recreate a photo for our old photo trail. For this season's photo trail, we're in the garden, so we're doing something slightly different. We're going to recreate this photo here. But first I'll talk about the differences and the similarities in the photo. First of all, the main thing you'll notice is 3 people. In the middle we've got Mr. Fraser. This was the superintendent. He's quite smart here, he's got his hat on, and he was the boss. To the right and left we've got 2 gardeners, although we're not quite sure of their identities, because even though we've got records, they don't seem to match the records in age. Then we've got a tree slightly behind them. That tree's not there now, even though there is a similar one just to the right of it. And we don't really know the species of the tree, but we can tell it's very similar. There's still a tree there, but it's a different tree. That's all we know. In the background we've got the mansion house itself. The mansion house is actually brickwork, but it's been plastered over with this creamy sort of material. But that's not, that material is still here, but there's actually ivy on it. The mansion house used to have ivy on it quite a long time ago, but that was taken down because it was quite structural damaging. We can also notice, if you look really closely, there is a lady in quite a magnificent dress, and it looks like she's pushing a pram. That could have been one of the farmers, or it could have just been a lady visiting the gardens. Now, we know that the picture was taken up on this hill where the camera is now, but unfortunately when we're going to recreate it in the moment, we can't do that. We're going to bring it down here because of this bush here. This is obviously a really recent addition to the gardens. However, it's interesting to notice that the 4 beds around me, you can still see the outlines of these beds in pretty much the same positioning and the same sort of style of maintaining it in the picture, which is really interesting. You can see the dip, which is the dell, just behind us, and you can also see the rose tunnel just along here, which is just along there. And so that's pretty much it, except one more thing. The clock, which you might see on the mansion house there now, is not here in this picture, because the clock was actually to mark the anniversary of how long the gardens have been open to the public. But now, let's get on with trying to recreate the photo. John and Paul have joined me from the Nonsuch Voles to help out with this picture, and Ivan in the middle is one of the dedicated gardeners who keeps the garden looking beautiful. Ivan's brought along one of the old Nonsuch Park uniforms as he represents Mr. Fraser in the middle of the picture. Trying to get the right angle from this level is hard, so I have to be scrutinous. But eventually we get there, and I think I can say the crew are happy with the results. And so, here is our modern retake. But we couldn't leave without adding our own photo of the Nonsuch Voles to the archives. And so here's our version for someone else to recreate in another century. I've come down to the ponds in Nonsuch, one of my favourite places to be in the spring. New life is everywhere and there's an explosion of tadpoles in the water. But I'd be careful because reports from park keepers several years earlier suggest there could be an escaped snapper turtle living in the depths. Flowers are abundant, like these beautiful wild yellow irises. Cuckoo spit is also present on the banks of the pond. But none of that's what I came to find. This spectacular footage shot at the Nonsuch ponds shows the moment 5 small moorhen chicks left their nest for the very first time.
Through the reeds every night, there's a blue heron calling from the bayou in sight, and with tide swelling, oh no, you will soon.
So I decided to come back a few weeks later to try and find these chicks in a more matured state. I found the abandoned nest almost instantly, and then nearby one of the adult moorhens feeding in the shallows with its partner just behind. I'm really hopeful I'll be able to find one of the moorhen chicks. And then, out of the bushes appears what I came to see. The moorhen chicks. Grown up now, they represent more of their parents, but their adolescent brown feathers still remain. The wagging tail feathers are actually to signal the risk of predation. As the risk increases, the rate of flickering also increases, as they display their state of awareness whilst wandering along the banks of the pond searching for food. Contrary to belief, their feet are not webbed and they have long toes like other rails. The young lack the red shield on the front of their face that the adult moorhens have, and although some urban moorhens can become very tame, the ones here at Nonsuch will be gone in a flash as soon as any movement is detected in the surroundings. With one last look back, and then it's gone into the bushes, with its siblings following close behind. But before I go, I see the two parents up in the treetops, and I'll just know they'll be safe for another year. I'm here in the heart of Nonsuch at the Mansion House, rebuilt in 1803 to look as it stands today, and it's a Grade 2 listed building. The Mansion House has been host to various people and has had many functions in its life. It occupied the farmer family up until 1937 when the estate became public. In current years it's become a hit for weddings, film and TV companies and photo shoots. Some of the footage shot here includes the kids TV show Am I High, the Cheryl Cole L'Oreal advert, and a TV show called Made in Chelsea who shot a party scene on a renowned lower floor. Join us as we take a privileged look inside. I'm meeting up with Jade from the Nonsuch Mansion team to learn more about what they facilitate here.
Well, weddings mainly. Obviously that's what we do best, but we also do a lot of photo shoots. We have a lot of filming here. We've had a lot of adverts, a lot of stills. So we have a lot of companies come to us. We do a lot for magazines. We had a very beautiful photo shoot recently for Hello Magazine, and we do a lot of private parties. We do some wakes. Why not when the house is empty in the week? But mainly we concentrate on being a party kind of venue.
However, the mansion house wasn't always this nice, and as these pictures show, a lot of work went into restoring it. So I wanted to know more about the restoration.
It was left as derelict for a long time. We reopened its doors in 2009. We did a big refurb, what you see today. Took down the old blinds, give it a bit of a spruce up, and yeah, it's opening now to its wedding venues. And we just put a bit of a modern twist, using some funky different wallpapers throughout the house as well, just to kind of give it a bit of a modern twist and make it a bit different.
And I agree. The funky wallpaper, as shown here in the library, is so modern, but fits so perfectly with the 19th century house and the original designs alongside the mirrors. My favourite room, however, has to be the north porch, with caring messages on the top of the four walls and the marvellous designs. Old portraits of former farmers also stare down upon you as you enter the mansion house. But one can't simply just enter without being blown away by the chandeliers above. The Mansion House team has also passionately restored these to their original beauty and beyond. The detail is amazing, and the golden colour represents importance and style. However, a trip next door into the orchards room reveals some amazing stained glass. A former king and his associates line the top of the windows, whilst on the south porch the farmer family's emblems can be seen below and above on the ceilings. And the ceilings are something to marvel at, each room with its own unique style and individual corner pieces, which both add something magical to this house. But take a trip up the stairs, and more chandeliers and more stained glass meets the eye. Not forgetting the luxurious bridal dressing room, which oozes love and comfort before the big I do. This room has a special place in so many brides' memories. But it isn't all this luxurious, as we found out in another part of the house.
I'm down here in a cellar surrounded by these old bricks from Nonsuch Palace, but the cellars played an important role in the Second World War because they were opened as emergency air raid shelter, meaning civilians like you and me could have just come down here and taken shelter in their privately owned estate. But that's not the only thing that Nonsuch provided. It wasn't just air shelters, but because Nonsuch was so huge, so massive, much of the land was cultivated by land scales. It was mostly wheat that was grown, but a small flock of sheep were also kept in the old barn, which is roughly where the barn stands today. But at a later date, nearer to D-Day, the Canadian Military Intelligence HQ was based here in Nonsuch Mansion, and much of the land surrounding the mansion house would have been occupied by Canadian soldiers camping out before the big D-Day event. But there's also some deeper secrets down here. A rumour supposedly states there's an ancient tunnel which leads from the mansion house here to somewhere in Cheam Village, probably Whitehall or the Vetchery. It was wide enough that a horse and carriage could be ridden down it, and so, although there's not any evidence for that, we hope that it is true, because that would be a really exciting find for the future.
Down here, the corridors are dark and dingy, so no wonder about the fluorescent lighting. You wouldn't think a cellar is that interesting, more of a dumping ground for toilets, picnic sets, chimneys, roof tiles of clay and slate, and even an ancient air ventilator. Far from these historic doors that I find fascinating, there's a room full of stones from Nonsuch Palace which even until this day are still being churned up and found by the public, but in slightly smaller quantities. Unfortunately, because of the humidity and temperature down here, if these were ever to be taken up to the surface unprotected, they would just disintegrate. However, look at some of this detail. This is a claw of what would have been a full-figured animal. Absolutely stunning. When these cellars were used for the kids' TV show MI High, these boards were placed down, but originally this area was for 2 large coal boilers. The coal would have been carried down the original, very steep steps into the cellar and kept in storage just to the left, which is nowadays abandoned. Join us later in the show as we exit the cellars and explore the upper floors of the house.
Hello, my name is Duncan Walford and this is your Nonsuch News. To start off with, at the start of spring, the mallards in the Dew Pond gave birth to 10 beautiful ducklings. Unfortunately, none of the ducklings survived their first week, but we do have some exclusive footage of them. Both the nursery lodge in the centre of the park and the London lodge are going to be moved forward in their plans to become occupied. A forest nursery is going to be moved into the coincidentally named Nursery Lodge and is currently improving its facial features inside the facility. However, the London Lodge is going to be turned into a veterinary clinic, which in our opinion is the perfect business to move into the lodge. The paving in the Mansion House courtyard has been resurfaced thanks to a healthy donation from the Friends of Nonsuch alongside the money donated from the council. A coal tit has also decided to take residence in the courtyard. However, it is not currently lived up to last year's blue tit nest made in the ground drain. The green flag awarded to Nonsuch at last year's Nonsuch Awareness Day has been erected with a flagpole outside the north porch of the Nonsuch mansion. Speaking of Nonsuch Awareness Day, this year's event will be held on Sunday, September the 15th. A photograph sent in by a viewer shows an albino magpie spotted in the park. If you've got any interesting photos, don't be afraid to send them in to our Twitter account or by our website. Lastly, some people may have noticed the Story of Nonsuch posters located around the park, such as on the side of the bins in the Nonsuch pantry area. I'm Duncan Walford, this is your Nonsuch News for spring. Now back to Mark, who's exploring the Nonsuch mansion.
I'm exploring the mansion house. Earlier we discovered the ground floor and the basement. Now join me on the first floor, which has to be said is a little worse for wear. These rooms were used by Scola up until a few years ago, and it wasn't left in the best state. Trousers have found their way into fireplaces, and peeling paint is far from many of the problems. Cobwebs cover much of the windows, although at least the view is nice. This would have had a figurine originally, but it's now a perching spot for a Nonsuch kestrel. And this unique ceiling piece is a Tudor rose. Unfortunately, once again the ceiling is tired, but if the ground floor taught us anything, is that this house can be rescued and restored. And each room on the upper floor has its very own masterpiece. On the upper floor, each room still has its original Victorian fireplace, the star of which has to be this one. It looks like a normal fireplace, but at night the mayor would cover the grating with this beautiful set of hinged iron doors. I've never seen anything quite like it. This fireplace possesses an extraordinary design, decorative indeed and built with amazing quality. However, this isn't the only fireplace. We found this one in another room with its vibrant colour that attracted us straight away. Another room on the upper floor is the clock room, and of course the main feature is the clock mechanism. Tickety-tock, this system is so complicated and is a true representation of the marvellous engineering available to human beings. The bell sounds each hour, and the amount of rings is equivalent to the time on a 12-hour clock. But this was once a bedroom, and it had an intriguing contraption. Now we're in a clock room, and it's a really cool mechanism. Apart from the clock itself, the bell which it controls. About here there would be 4-poster beds when it was initially built, this house, for the farmer family. And as you might be able to see, there's a small thin line that goes across the ceiling. And there would have been a little cord that a person in bed could pull. And it would come down, and as it comes along here, it would have been connected to this little mechanism here. It's actually to open a door. So it's when the servants come in, they knock on a door, the door can be locked. And to open it, the rod would be pulled upwards, it would release the mechanism on the door, which isn't there now, and it would just open the door, and that would mean the lady or the sir would just be able to stay in bed without moving, and the servants could come in. The ageing damage to this room is minimal, but still distressing. Far from the luxurious 19th century room it used to be. But fortunately, there are plans to try and get the upper floor back into use. It's just a matter of finding someone with the passion and business ideal for this location. Upwards still, and we reach the top floor of the mansion. These rooms are truly in need of a restoration. But hidden gems can be found, like this old boiler, and a pigeon egg from the days when pigeons nested in these rooms. The radiator is one of style and beauty. But join us as we make our way up onto the roof. The mansion's Gothic style means these turrets hide away the chimneys, but the biggest spectacle has to be the views. By the service wing chimneys lies a stone in the brickwork, which is in fact the farmer family emblem. And in the garden, the flowers are lovely, like this Tudor rose artwork.
The views up here are spectacular, and we've had great fun exploring the mansion house, and we hope you have too. Join us later in the series as we explore the service wing of the mansion house run by the Friends of Nonsuch. In this part of the programme we're going to be doing a Bioblitz. Well, what is a Bioblitz? A Bioblitz is when you get out into your garden, your local outdoor space, and you record all the species you can find. Today we're doing it in 1 hour. We're going to search the whole of the park, starting here in Warren Farm, which isn't actually part of Nonsuch Park, but I like to think of it as, because it connects to it, we're still going to be going here because it's such rich biodiversity. Well, what you need to do something like this if you're getting out and about is, the first thing, you want a guidebook. A guidebook is great, and I got this one from the Friends of Nonsuch book sale for about 50p to £1. This one's got all things from trees to insects to plants and birds, and it's really great because when you don't know what you're looking at, you can just refer to one of these and it will help you record it. Next thing you want is a pair of binoculars. These are quite useful because when you're looking at a bird that's flying overhead or a butterfly in the distance, if you just quickly look at them, gives you a close-up view and it's easy to identify the species you're looking at. Next thing you might want to have is a camera. A camera is great, you don't need a fancy one with a big lens. A zoom does help sometimes, but it means you can just quickly record what you're looking at, and so if you're not quite sure on the species at the time, you can go back home, look it up on the internet and find out what species it is. But then the final thing you want to have whilst on a Bioblitz is your clipboard with the Bioblitz chart on. This chart shows you the species found, you can record it here, identified by who. If you're doing it as a group, you can have a bit of competition. Certain, likely or uncertain. So are you sure that's the species you found? Or are you totally unsure and you're having a wild guess, but you know it's another species that you haven't found before on that day? Comment and a photo you can also put in. So you can download this from our website and we'll put a link up there. I've got 90 or more spaces to find species today, and what's going to happen is I know Nonsuch really well and I know all the wildlife and I've seen tons of wildlife here. But the thing is, that's irrelevant today. Only the wildlife I find today on this hour am I going to record. So any wildlife that I've seen last week and I can't find it today, well, tough luck, it's not going to be on here, and I'm just going to, even though I know it's there, it's not what we found today. So that's what we're going to do, so let's get started. So straight away, there's loads of biodiversity, and the first thing I see is dandelions. Lots of you may be familiar with these. They grow quite close to the ground, this bright yellow flower. They are pests in gardens, but actually what you'll find is that dandelion originates from the French words dent de lion. That's, I know my French is not very good, but that is basically translates as lion's tooth. I'm not quite sure why it's called lion's tooth. It could be because the flower itself looks like a lion's mane, or maybe when it's shooting out the ground it looks familiar to a lion's tooth. I don't really know, I haven't been close up to a lion to see. And then there's also quite a lot of other stuff. So if we get up, there's this plant. This plant is a pest in Warren Farm. It's called Canadian rod, and it has been an invasive plant from people's gardens. Quite a lot of florists like to use it in their flower arrangements, and the thing is, there's a huge volunteer effort to get rid of this plant, and if you just grab it by its roots, this one's quite a new one because it's hard to get up, but see that, it's really short root and it's really too easy to get up, and I've started myself doing some pulling of these roots up in the main Warren Farm, and you can help out this summer if you want something to do by pulling these out and taking back the original native biodiversity to this area.
Also, by pulling these out, you're disturbing the ground slightly, and you might get poppies pop up, because I remember as a child, these fields used to be full of poppies some years, and I haven't seen them for ages now. So I'm going to write those two down, and then we're going to carry on with the Bioblitz. Look at that. Look at all these slugs and snails we've got. That's definitely the black slug. This is the slug we're not quite sure on the species of. Oh, we've got millipedes. I've got another black slug. This sort of fungi. This is a really rich log, and it's got tons and tons of different species under it. And so I'm going to record these. I'm going to move on. So in this area, you'd often have bluebells, snowdrops at the start of spring. They've sort of died down now, so there's not many left. But just have a look at the time. We've got about 20 species to get into 100. And we've only got about 10 minutes left, so I think we need to hurry up. Let's try and get those 20 species in the next 10 minutes. Let's go. ¿Cómo quieres que te quiera si me siento una muñeca que manejan a su antojo y no se quejan? Ay, qué paciencia, ay, qué paciencia, ay, qué paciencia la mía. No me digas que no, ya no me creo tus mentiras. No me digas que no. Blackbird yet, so we're going to write that down. And there we go, there's a tadpole. That's our last species, and that's got us 100 species today in just like 1 minute to go. And that's brilliant. So we've got 100 species in this park, just shows the biodiversity. I'm very hot, and but it's been a great hour out. And I suggest you get out here and try and beat some of our records of 100 species. If you do, send us something, a photo of you out and about. We'd love to see you. But it just shows that Nonsuch is so rich, so biodiverse, and that's why I love this park. So we were just coming along this path, and we spotted this on the floor. It had a massive beetle on it, which has disappeared. It's a dead shrew, and it's quite cool, because I'm going to use this paper, which we're not going to be using, and it's quite cool because definitely a shrew, because you can tell it's long nose, and it can't be dead long because it's not decaying. And these are quite hard to see normally. You wouldn't normally see them around, and they're normally out in the grasses. It's very hard to spot. So to see one like this, unfortunately it is dead. It's not the greatest opportunity to see one, but it does give you a nice close-up size. So if I put my hand against it, it's very small. Might have died from disease or anything really. But unfortunately that would be caught by a fox or a large bird of prey. And but that's just something a little cool that we found on our Bioblitz. So it does show if you come out on one of these days, you will find something that you haven't seen before, whether it be dead or alive, and they are. Spring has been a great programme, full of surprises, and we're glad you come and join